Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the second day of the SRI week. I'm very happy to be here and organize this webinar regarding a very important issue that we are discussing these days, and we are talking about the EU taxonomy as a transition tool. We are organizing this webinar under the patronage of the European Commission and the European Parliament. So I would like to thank you both of these important institutions to give us the patronage for this initiative. I would like to introduce the participants of this event today. First of all, I would like to thank you to Mr. Fabrizio Spada, who is head of institutional relations of the European Parliament in Italy, and our keynote speaker, Ms. Elisabetta Siracusa, Senior Advisor of Directorate General for Financial Stability, Financial Services, and the Capital Market Union. Then I will give the floor to my colleague Pietro Negri for the moderation of the roundtable, and Pietro will introduce the participants of roundtable later on. But before to give the floor to Mr. Spada, I would like to send you some very short messages. For a forum is quite important. For Forum for Sustainable Finance is quite important is what we discussed today, because it's part of our initiative of policy that we are carrying out in the last month, and we will carry out in the 2022. As you know, as many of you know, Forum is the older organization in Italy specialized in sustainable finance. We born 20 years ago, and our nature of multi-stakeholder organization allow us to face the issue regarding the SRI market from different point of view. As you know, we are financial operators inside of the Forum, asset manager, banks, insurance company, pension fund, banking foundation, but we have a very important component of civil society. So non-profit organization, NGO that coming from the third sector, and in a sense can dialogue and put in common some ideas that we have regarding the sustainable development. Just a few considerations regarding why it is quite important for us, the taxonomy for the SRI market is quite important for one keyword, which is the transparency. We need more transparency in the financial system, and we need also to consolidate the credibility of, we can say, what we call sustainable finance. In this sense, having a taxonomy at European level can help a lot and can give some rules which are quite important in order to have a sort of system answer to the future of a new model of development. There are some open questions that I think that with the webinar today we will able to reply, to answer. The first one is how taxonomy can help the growth of the market, and how can improve the quality of investment in terms of the real sustainability. I mean that, so as the title say, I mean that taxonomy is a tool that can be very important to resolve some problems and help and support the SRI market. The second open question that I give you is how taxonomy can really guide the just transition, helping both investors and companies. How push towards a science-based approach? This is another open debate regarding what could be classified as sustainable or not. And for the last one that for us is quite important is why it's important to integrate the social taxonomy draft report that we are analyzing in these days with the reform of sustainable finance and the extension also of green taxonomy. So there are many questions, of course, questions that very complex, and I think that is not easy to simplify all this matter. But I think that it's quite important to starting a debate and going into the details of this kind of math. So I stop here. I don't want to take too much time, and I'm very happy to give the floor to Mr. Fabrizio Spada, Head of Institutional Relations of the European Parliament in Italy. Thanks a lot, Mr. Spada. I give you the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Bicciato. Many thanks for inviting me, and good morning to everybody. The challenges of climate change and the need of make the transition to a greener, more sustainable economy that respect the resources limitation of our planet are imminent and global. The European Union is willing to lead by example and take seriously its commitment to contribute to reaching the Paris Agreement climate goals and to become the first climate neutral continent by 2050. This requires a consistent and long-term strategy for a more sustainable growth, touching upon several policy areas and economic sectors. For this reason, the European Union launched a new growth strategy, the European Green Deal. The Green Deal involves many initiatives and strategies, from more sustainable agriculture to increase energy efficiency, supporting low-carbon smart mobility and the circular economy. Moreover, the European Union has increased funding for green and sustainable investment through its regular budget for the next year until 2027 and the additional recovery instrument, Next Generation EU, allowing us to address the current COVID-19 crisis and climate change challenges. Turning the European Green Deal into reality requires substantial additional investment and finance. We estimate that across the European Union, additional investment of around 40 and 70 billion euros need to be made every year to achieve our climate and environmental targets. It's a huge investment program for the next years. The vast majority of sustainable investment we have to be made by the private sector. Public-private cooperation in this context is crucial. The first delegated act adopted last June focuses on the climate change mitigation and adaptation. It includes sectors with highest shares of use total emission, energy, manufacturing, transport, and buildings. The Commission will adopt a climate taxonomy delegated act covering activities not yet covered. The taxonomy indeed clarifies which sustainable economy activities are in line with the European Green Deal. This will give important guidance for investors and companies. This improved transparency will lower significantly the cost of identifying and selecting sustainable economy investment. Based on the taxonomy, the Commission adopted last July a proposal on a European green bond standard. The aim is to create a gold standard based on the market and best practice available to all green bond issuers on a voluntary basis. This will create an important framework for investors seeking to support truly green investments. In the future, the European Union will evaluate whether it is appropriate to extend the scope of the proposed regulation to cover other objectives, in particular social ones. The Commission, the European Parliament and stakeholders consider taxonomy an important factor in achieving sustainable finance. Moreover, there is consensus to need a review the taxonomy regularly in order to align it with the market developments. This crisis teaches us whether we also need to be aware of social, economic, and ecological resilience factors we need to address to be prepared for future climate shocks. We need to work for having a common global language around sustainability to guide our economies and our recovery efforts. Many thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Mr. Spada, and thanks to European Parliament, which is very active in this historical moment regarding the sustainable finance topics. So I would like to give the floor to Ms. Elisabetta Siracusa. Good morning, Elisabetta. Thanks to be with us. We are really happy to have you with us, with your experience. And I give the floor to provide us, your point of view of especially the strategy that we are facing and the scenario also that you will see in front of us. Please, I give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bicciato, and thank you also to Mr. Spada for illustrating where we are at this stage in our reflection and in our further future opportunities as regards taxonomy and other instruments of sustainable finance. So I am absolutely delighted to be here in this very distinguished company, and I have to congratulate you for this excellent initiative. And I was going to start my speech by saying that the European Union and the European Commission are front runners in the reflection of sustainable finance, but I have to say that the Forum for Sustainable Finance beats us all, because as you recalled, this is the 20th anniversary of the forum, so I really congratulations for being such an advance on the times and on thinking about sustainable finance at a time where no one else was thinking about it. So I think this is a very apt moment and a very apt context in which perhaps to try to explain to you a little bit what is the strategy that lies behind our various actions on sustainable finance in the European Union, and a strategy in particular of the European Commission, which has been renewed this past July. In July 2021, we have had the occasion to publish a renewed strategy, and this is where I would like to start. As Mr. Spada recalled, the wider political context of our sustainable finance strategy is the European Green Deal. And the European Green Deal requires a holistic approach, a whole of government and a whole of economy approach to fulfilling our climate objectives. Without this whole of government and whole of economy approach, it will be very difficult to be where we want to be in 2050. And let me remind you that recently the European Union has set also objectives for 2030 in the form of a reduction of 55% in GHG emissions. So how do we get there? How do we reach these objectives? Well, obviously, financing is fundamental. And we know, as Mr. Spada recalled, how big are the financing needs. In fact, Mr. Spada put it by year, but if we look at it for the whole decade, if we look at the financing needs for the whole decade, it amounts to something like 350 billion euros for the energy transition alone in terms of annual extra investment. And this is on top of something like 130 billion, which is envisaged for the environmental goals. So you see that these are massive amounts. And Mr. Spada has recalled the major effort that has been made with public finance, not only with the budget of the European Union, but with the Next Generation EU. But this is clearly not enough. And this is why we have the Sustainable Finance Framework. And this framework, we believe, needs to be clear, consistent, and robust. And this is what we set about doing with our first strategy, with our first action plan on sustainable finance, which was based, as you know, on three main pillars. One of them is the taxonomy. of course, which is going to be the main subject of today's discussion. But this is accompanied by an extensive set of rules on disclosures. And the third pillar is essentially a number of other tools, which can range from labels to green bonds and green bond standards that Mr. Spada already referred to. So, but let me get back to the strategy, because I think it is very useful to see what drives, from a political point of view and from a policy objective point of view, what drives the various actions of the European Union. And the strategy of July 2021 is very clear that our action is framed by four main principles. And the first one, you will not be surprised to find out, is transition. The first principle is transition. This means that everything that we do in sustainable finance must translate into a support for the real economy to fulfill the objectives of the green transitions. This means that we need to help the real economy. We need to help economic sectors. We need to help businesses, no matter how big or how small, to move from where they are today to a future situation in which they can be called fully sustainable and in which they make a clear contribution to our sustainability objectives. So the question is, does the current framework sufficiently support the transition? Not necessarily, and this is very clearly and honestly underlined in our strategy, in our communication, and we have committed to think further as to how we can support the transition. And there are various ways of doing this. The taxonomy is one of them, but we are thinking also of other ways that could include, for example, transition bonds, that could include further classifications. And of course, we will be able to discuss this a bit later, I am sure. The second very, very important principle is inclusiveness. Whatever we do in sustainable finance needs to be inclusive. This means that we need to support all in their participation to achieving our goals. We need to support SMEs, but we also need to support citizens, households. We need to enable citizens to make choices about sustainable investments, but most of all, we need to support SMEs, small and medium enterprises, which are the backbone of the European Union's economy, in their participation, in their transformation, and in their transition towards more sustainable practices. So we are very, very aware of that, and this is going to be one of the main focuses of our action. And may I add that all in my conversations that I have with the sectors, and of course with financial institutions as well, the question of SMEs is always, always very present. And the fact that we need to support SMEs to launch themselves in the transition with everything that we have. The third principle is a very important one, and it is resilience. We need to improve the financial sector's own resilience and own contribution to sustainability. And you know that we have what we call a double materiality principle, which is essentially the analysis and the taking into account of the impact of risks, not only on the financial sector itself, or not only on the investors themselves, but of the investment on society. And I think this is important, and this plays very well into our approach, our political approach to sustainability. And we have a number of areas that we need to look at. We need to look at macroprudential tools for bank supervisors. We will need to look at how financial institutions themselves have sustainability goals and how they integrate those long-term sustainability goals into their financing strategy, into their decision-making processes. And so these are all areas we will look at. And we will need to monitor at the end of the day the financial sector's own progress to meet these climate and environmental goals. And we obviously have heard, we all follow the COP26, and we have heard that has been very much the forefront of the discussions in COP26 with commitments made. And this is something, of course, we will look at. Now, the fourth very important principle that guides our action is a global ambition. Obviously, climate change is a global challenge, and obviously it requires global solutions. We will not be able to do this alone. So whatever we do, whatever approach we have, we look at it as from a global point of view. We look at how we can ensure that there is a level playing field out there. And I think this is an important consideration for our businesses, but also for our financial institutions. We need to look at how we can have common languages, common standards that enable us to measure and to see how we all progress towards climate and environmental goals. And it's the notion of a common language which is embodied for the European Union in taxonomy is something that is being discussed, of course, at international level, and I refer in particular to the G20 context, where it is recognized that metrics that are interoperable and that may share commonalities and that may be comprehensible across borders are going to be very important in the future. So these are the four principles that preside to our action. Let me come back for one moment to the taxonomy. The taxonomy is, as I said, one of the three main pillars of our action. And you can see that taxonomy will be fundamental in delivering on some of these principles. It will be fundamental in delivering on the principle of transition. It will also be fundamental in delivering in the principle of inclusiveness. I have been very interested in hearing reactions to taxonomy, as I said, from the real economy, from financial institutions, from banks, and the need for a common language has emerged at every step. The need for a common language is a fundamental basis for the real economy. For businesses, small and medium enterprises, from small and medium enterprises to big businesses, to be able to have their efforts towards a sustainable future recognized. And I think this is the aspect of the taxonomy that I would like to underline here. The fact that this common language allows both the real economy and investors to discern where they want to provide support and for what environmental goals. The future steps of the taxonomy, I think, are known to all. And Mr. Spada mentioned some of them. But I would like to underline how the future development of the taxonomy, which passes through, as you know, a number of delegated acts which are going to be adopted by the European Commission. The future really of the taxonomy lies in its ability to provide a common language that will support the real economy in its transition path. And of course, as I'm sure there will be occasion to discuss later today, the transition itself is already incorporated, embodied in the disclosure part of the taxonomy, where we have the possibility for undertakings to indicate what measures they're going to take to be in line with taxonomy criteria in the future. So you see how sensitive we are to the need for taking into account the fact that businesses require a certain amount of time and require a certain amount of actions that themselves need to be supported in order to become sustainable. So I hope I have given you an overview of why we are acting, so the principles on which we base our strategy, and an overview of the main areas, such as the taxonomy and the disclosures, where we make an effort to take into account transition considerations, And I leave you with the assurance that transition is very much at the forefront of the Commission's reflection, as indicated in the strategy. And therefore, I will be very interested in hearing your speakers today and what they can contribute to the discussion, and this will feed, along with all of the other stakeholders, into a more general reflection as to how to improve even more the capacity of the European Commission and of the European Union to support the transition towards a more sustainable future. Thank you very much. And may I hand the floor back to Francesco Bicciato. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks really a lot, Ms. Siracusa. It's quite interesting, quite clear, and a lot of topics that I think that we can discuss also in the roundtable. I just give you one technical information to everybody. I remind that we are today around 600 people that are attending to this webinar. We are very happy of this participation. What I would like to say that you can do the questions for roundtable and also to Ms. Siracusa if you use the blue player in your screen. You can send the questions with the chat system. So if you want, you are able, you can do that. So quite interesting what Ms. Siracusa said, the criteria of taxonomy as a real tool for the transition. I think that we can consider a dynamic tool, and I think that is quite important, this mix between clear rules from one side and flexibility from the other side. Talking about how companies can use this kind of tool, I think that we have to reflect very much regarding the usability of the rules that coming from European Commission. But I think that is all these topics we will deal during our roundtable. So I would like to give the floor to my colleague Pietro Negri. Pietro, thank you to be here, and I ask you if you can introduce your guest of the roundtable, and I give you the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Francesco. I'm very proud to be here. My story with my relationship with the forum, with the Eurosif, it's very, very long. It takes the last 20 years. And I'm particularly proud to be here because I was the chairperson of the Eurosif till August 2020. For this reason, I thanks a lot my friends to invite me to drive try to drive this roundtable. I'm going to introduce my guests, the participants for this roundtable. We have three very important persons and a woman, because they are really involved into sustainability, and they'll try to give us a different position in the applicable of the taxonomy. Three different points that could help us for reflection. I would only give you some my view on these topics. First of all, I subscribe totally the first point that Mrs. Siracusa gave us just a few minutes ago about transition, and this is the reasons why our government decided to create two ministers for transition. The first one dedicated totally for environmental transition, and the last one dedicated to digital transition. And we have also to remember that we have another minister dedicated to sustainable and infrastructure. And this is it's really important because it's a clear sign of the importance of this topic and the relevance of this particular moment that we are trying to cross. I would only spend some words about the paper that was published by Eurosif at the end of last September. Totally, it was a short paper prepared by a working group composed by the member of Eurosif. And in attempt to underline the highlights and the main guideline on which it is based, highlighting the main aspect for practitioners when using the taxonomy. The legislation that is already told by Ms. Siracusa and Mrs. Siracusa and Mr. Spada is still incomplete and very, very complicated. And the real risk is that it will become quite difficult to implement. But the paper highlights in particular 2 points that I would underline. The first point is the need to consider the difficult balance between data availability and data comparability. As you well know, the data on the taxonomy alignment of economy activities is useful, first of all, for undertakings as a starting point for analyzing their positioning versus competitors and their progress towards decarbonization and building a new kind of cycle totally dedicated to circular economy. And the taxonomy highlights 3 different and important, really important key indicators: revenues and capex and OPEX. That could be also useful for financial players, financial market participants, to disclose their information about the organization, to understand better how their investments are put in place, and to present their product to their customers. The efficacy of European transparency regulation and taxonomy, and also the data, depends on the availability of data. Data needs to be reliable and comparable, and equally important is that more undertakings should disclose information on sustainability themes. More information will be available to the market. Another important point that the paper tried to point out concern the transparency of disclosure on sustainable product. That is the direct consequence of the first point. And as already Mrs. Siracusa told us, is a sort of unique tool composed by 3 different parts. The first part is taxonomy. The second one is corporate sustainability reporting directive. And the third one is sustainable finance disclosure regulation. The difficulty is balance the three pillars of this unique tool in the right way to transit as fast as possible to a new kind of economy. But I don't want to use all the time for my reflection. I would give the floor, I would leave the floor to my guests. I'm going to introduce the first one. Is Mr. Luca Atardi, that works for the... good morning, Luca.
Good morning.
Luca works in the Corporate Social Responsibility and Reporting department of A2A. A2A is one of the most important public utility working in Italy. And Luca, A2A emitted a green bond taxonomy aligned just a few weeks ago. I read on the newspaper that had a 3-time demand on offer for financing eligible green project, I think for activities related with mitigation. The first question that I would give you is, could you tell us some insights on this and give us some more precise information on this emission? And which methodology did you use for selecting the alignment? Thanks a lot. Luca, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pietro. Good morning, everyone. 3 weeks ago, A2A issued a green bond with use of proceeds aligned with the taxonomy regulation, clearly with the climate mitigation and adaptation to climate change. And I think we are among the first. Within the investor presentation, we made a prospectus, a table where we put a description of our approach on the evaluation of the technical screening criteria and donor significant harm for each possible activity and project eligible to be included in the issuance. We also dedicated a slide showing the policies, procedures, and commitments that guarantee our compliance with minimum safeguards. All the presentation was anticipated by a screening process of all the capex of the business plan, of our business plan, in order to identify all the assets that could be have the right characteristics. There was a huge interest from investor in I think going deep in the detail especially for donor significant harm, and it was unexpected. Clearly, by the way, I heard a lot of people talking only about technical screening criteria, but I think we must remember that the taxonomy alignment is an holistic assessment. So we do not underestimate the 3 steps to verify the alignment. So the technical screening, the minimum safeguards, and also the donor significant harm. I think that the value added of this of the issuance is related to the transparency, and the most transparency as possible on the methodology and the criteria used. So just to underline again that transparency is fundamental, because I'm worried sometimes because I saw some estimates made from some info providers on my sector with a share of alignment of the 3 main KPIs. With this hypothesis, the share is very low, and it doesn't match with our experience and some expectation of also of our competitor. So I think that this first test, first experiment with the use of taxonomy also in insurance will be useful, and for sure I hope that before the 2024 we will engage more also with all the financial world to directly explain the criteria in details. But I think that to do this, we must develop capacity building and how to say, focused on only on the topic, only on taxonomy, and this is valid not only for companies but also for investors.
Thanks a lot to you, Luca. But I have another short question for you. And which particular tools did you use in evaluating the eligibility of your business activities? Because this is very an hard question and an hard activity to choose and to put in the right place the activity that you want to finance by an emission.
We self-made a tool, very simple, but built like a sort of mirroring with the same scheme of the delegated act of the taxonomy, the annex of the delegated act. So we put some information about the technical screening criteria, and we put also some information, the basic information that we could share, for example, in the investor presentation regarding each part of the donor significant harm for each activity. And but this work was done before for all the activity of the group. We organized a lot of meetings with all colleagues, more technician than me, and with all the companies and legal entities inside our group. I don't know if all you know that A2A is a multi-utility company, but is completely entirely impacted by this regulation. We are the second largest energy producer. We are present in all the value chain of the waste management, from collection to waste collection, treatment, and landfill management. And we run networks, so the distribution of water, gas, electricity, district heating. So we really needed to understand how much A2A was sustainable or not. So we started analyzing the draft of the regulation, and we worked on matching all the activities included in the taxonomy with the business asset of the group, as far as regards climate change mitigation and adaptation delegated act. However, we also in the first phase joined to several call for feedback, sometimes highlighting some possible limitation according to us of this regulation. As far as we are concerned, in fact, for example, two fundamental assets immediately emerged, one included as eligible but with great criticalities, and even one excluded from the eligibility. We are talking about the CCGT plan, the power production plant with gas and waste to energy plant, and also the retail activities, for example, the that is more relevant from an economic term for our group, the sale of energy, also electricity, not gas, clearly, actually is not eligible. So we held dedicated meetings at the highest level with the top management and also with the CEO, explaining in particular these issues for this business and asset. I think actually from someone the reaction was a sort of sense of denial or rejection for this regulation, because as I said, in a case a gas power plant could be eligible. However, the technical screening criteria was too too challenging, like the GHG emission limited at 100 grams per kilowatt hour. To the date, there is no technology to do this and to respect this threshold. So it was eligible, but clearly it won't be aligned. And on the other hand, for the environment view, we are currently aiming further development on waste to energy asset, because we know that in Italy, for example, the use of waste to energy is still necessary in the south of Italy. And how to say, we ask ourselves which is the underlying logic and the sense of this top-down approach of the regulation, because sometimes it seems to be far from the real situation of the country. But now we know that, for example, the decision on gas is still pending, and the waste to energy has a chance to enter in the delegated act related to circular economy. So we'll see in the next months, I think.
Thank you very much, Luca. I remember to the public that we are waiting for the delegated act concerning gas and nuclear. That it's planned to be published maybe at the end of this year or the first quarter of the next one. I would pass to the second host, and I invite here Sara Lovisolo. My friend Sara, that she's particularly involved into the European legislation. I remember to the public that Sara was at the moment is the head of group ESG at Euronext, but she was one of the member of the high-level group that helped the Commission to prepare the document that are component of the new regulation on sustainability and implementation of sustainability economics and finance. Good morning, Sara.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Pietro, for the. Thank you, Pietro,
for
the kind introduction and invitation to join you in this critical panel.
Sorry, I have a question for you, starting from your role in your organization. In your view, does taxonomy have an impact on the listing of firms? And how will the market position for listed companies change when taxonomy and corporate sustainability reporting directive are definitely implemented, in your view? Thanks. The floor is yours.
I think that the main criterion to judge whether a regulation works is to assess whether it's going to make a change, to drive change in the real economy. So this, I think, is the test for the taxonomy. As Mrs. Spada mentioned earlier, this regulation is designed to drive investment from companies and hence from investors into a change of the business models of company, a change in the operations of companies that will get closer to the benchmark represented by the taxonomy. The example of A2A, I think, is a clear sign of how this is going to work. And the fact that a green bond was used to implement the taxonomy is also very telling. It's a case where companies are using capital markets to raise funds to upgrade their operations, to make significant investments in ways that make their business model closer to the requirements of the taxonomy. So the taxonomy creates a sort of end point for a long journey that companies can undertake on capital markets using the capital raising tools made available on capital markets. On the other hand, investors will be forced somehow to pay attention to those to the criteria set by the taxonomy, and in this way a business case is created for company as well as also on the secondary market. So also on the secondary market, so when we are not at the IPO phase or raising capital through the issuance of bonds, it would be important for companies to demonstrate their alignment to the taxonomy, because they know that environmental funds will have to disclose the green ratio, the percentage of alignment of the fund to the taxonomy. So this heightened focus on the green economy is going to provide an incentive to disclosure, but not just to disclosure. So I'd like to highlight that it's providing an incentive to change, to use capital markets to equip the company to be part of the transition to an environmentally sustainable economy. So I believe this is going to be a game changer. It will take time. The screening criteria will be rolled out gradually. There is significant political debate around what counts as green. And this is confusing for issuers, as we've heard earlier from Luca. It's not clear, what's in, what's out, what are the criteria that will be applied. But these uncertainties will be clarified, hopefully, very soon. And the whole market will be able to focus just on understanding those criteria and understanding what investments are needed to get there, to get to that perhaps very ambitious, very aspirational standard, which is supporting the Green Deal and is supporting 2050 carbon neutral European economy that is not here yet. So this taxonomy has been designed to shape a carbon neutral European economy of 2050 that we are starting to build now. So I think this is the spirit in which we should look at the taxonomy.
But Mrs. Siracusa spoke about inclusiveness. Mrs. Siracusa spoke about inclusiveness. Don't you think that could become a limit for example, SMEs that are not included into listing companies? What's your view for a more inclusion of SMEs in this vision? And do you think that there is a difference between, for example, regulation or in terms of or a directive in terms of penetration of new EU action? And what's your opinion on that?
So no, the SMEs. Apologies, I misspelled. I meant to say Mrs. Siracusa earlier. So SMEs are not excluded. So investors can invest in SMEs if they create a green fund, an environmental fund distributed in Europe, invested in SMEs. They will have to disclose the green share, the green exposure of that fund invested in SMEs to the taxonomy. So it's not that they are excluded. They won't have the same reporting requirements as bigger companies, but this doesn't mean they cannot have access to green investment from investors. Clearly, investors will have to source the information in a different way. This could be through dialogue with SMEs directly. I'm not here to come up with the solutions. There are data providers that can also cover this area. But absolutely, SMEs are part of this through the investor disclosures obligation, but also we have to look at banks. So banks play an important role here when it comes to SMEs. The fact that banks are required to disclose their green asset ratio will trigger a conversation between banks and SMEs that will be able to demonstrate their green credentials will perhaps benefit from particular, care on the part of the banks. So I think once the definitions are there will be many ways of implementing them, not only through we should not just focus on the disclosures by large companies. The CSRD is still underway, also in terms of the definition of the scope of application. It's a dynamic interplay between financial institutions and companies that ultimately should lead to an encouragement to demonstrate closer alignment to the taxonomy.
Thanks a lot, Sara. I would introduce our last guest. I introduce Victor van Hoorn, the Executive Director at Eurosif. Good morning, Victor.
Good morning, Pietro.
Thanks to be here. Victor, today is the last day of COP26 in Glasgow. And it seems to me, reading on the news coming from Glasgow, that the COP travels on two different tracks that are not parallel and are built in progress. In the first track, there is a universal decision that are high profile, shared by all, and try to be based on scientific evidence. But it seems to me that these three requirements that are very difficult to keep together. On the other hand, we have another track where travel the real world that try to organize the transport, how to feed people, how to produce renewable energy and good stuff. And my question for you is, what's your opinion about the future of taxonomy with regard to upcoming issues related to gas and nuclear? And if you can give us a brief description of different approaches of EU countries on these topics. Thanks a lot. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Pietro. Thanks to Eurosif for inviting me this morning, and thank you, Pietro, for giving me the easy question on the controversial issues. I think it's fair to say that in the context of as we're finalizing COP, it's surprising to see that literally it seems every day there is a letter or an interview of a minister or a statement by a particular European country on the taxonomy. It seems to be really very much the talk of the day. Which is interesting in itself to see how much journey the taxonomy has already done up to now. I think for me, a lot of the discussions that you're seeing now comes back to the fact that we haven't reached yet a full consensus view on what we want the taxonomy to be in the end. And I think you're seeing that playing out with the different statements and different alliances and different positions of countries in Europe as we're hopefully getting closer to push the live button and get the taxonomy actually operational, because I think that's also something very good to remember. As long as the first set of rules on climate mitigation and adaptation to which Ms. Siracusa and Mr. Spada referred to are not endorsed and not published in the official journal, the system is not yet, hasn't gone live yet. And a lot of the other parts of the sustainable finance agenda depend on that. But essentially what you're seeing is that at the start, I think as Sara Lovisolo said very well, the starting point was let's come up with a roadmap, with a list of activities that we think, based on science, is aligned with this ambition of 2050 carbon neutral economy in Europe, which, by the way, now is also legally enshrined in the EU climate law, which sets that goal into law. And if you start from that premise, then it's not surprising that a lot of sectors are not going to be aligned with taxonomy. It's not surprising that the overall share of alignment of the European economy that we're currently estimating to be quite low, that is all not surprising, because what the taxonomy is then meant to do is to tell you this is the objective, the long-term objective you need to achieve, and then companies need to start disclosing versus those objectives, and investors need to start asking questions from companies. Okay, tell me, dear company, what are the plans that you have in place to reach that objective, and by when? So that I can engage in dialogue with you to see how we can maybe move that faster, and what kind of capital you need to fund those investments. On the other hand, and I think that's also to one of the core principles that Ms. Siracusa laid down in her remarks, is the fact about transition. Because if you produce a list that tells you what is sustainable in 2050, that list doesn't necessarily tell you a lot of information about how we're going to get there. And that's, I think, where we're seeing now this big debate about gas and nuclear being included, and if so, how, in the taxonomy framework, in which seems to trigger quite passionate discussions. I think if you take them one by one, I think if you look at the IEA net zero roadmap for 2050 published this year, you will see, unfortunately, that between now and 2050, we might temporarily, and in certain parts of Europe, need temporarily more gas than maybe we're using now, particularly to decommission, more dirtier fossil fuels such as coal. And equally, if you look at this IEA report and you look at the IPCC report, it's undeniable that in 2050, if you want to reach net zero, if you're looking at technologies that we have now at scale, nuclear energy will be part of that energy mix. And so I think what you're seeing now is this pull and push factor, where different countries are still essentially having a different vision about the taxonomy. Is it that list that tells you what's sustainable in 2050, or is it a framework that starts to also recognize what steps might be needed between now and 2050? And I think, unfortunately, that means that it's still very difficult to read where things are going to land. And I think, at the end of the day, as the previous speaker said as well, the success of the taxonomy will be about whether it helps the real economy into transitioning towards that more, sustainable vision that we have. And that, from a financial markets perspective, for me, will be the real litmus test in the future. Will be, does your taxonomy alignment result in a differential in your funding costs? Will your increased share of taxonomy alignment be reflected somehow in the spreads that you pay on your loans, on your bonds, the price at which you issue your equities? I think that will be the real test about the success. But I think one of the things we often forget about the taxonomy, why for me personally it is still a success, is the fact that for the first time in financial markets, we've come up with a framework that, in a way, what I call is sets some absolute sustainability performance thresholds. What it means is it tries to tell you based on science, look, this is what we need. This is the performance level we need from a sustainability perspective. So it's no longer kind of a relative performance that we're kind of marginally improving what we're doing, but it seems to set in an absolute term what is required. We can debate about whether that's always been very robust and rigorous for every sector covered by taxonomy, but I think that is already a pretty significant achievement.
Thank you, Victor. But it's clear that it can become a win-win game because somebody will disappear in this game in the next future. And on this point, do you think that can you give us your opinion on different approaches all over European countries on these topics? Do you observe different point of view, different approaches at the institutional level, but also on the market level that could be transferred to the public and to give some more information on that?
I think you see what you're seeing is countries are facing with their very specific needs. Basically, I think we know from a climate perspective the major challenge is to completely re-engineer a lot of our energy supply and decarbonize our energy supplies. And I think what we're seeing is the different starting points everywhere. France and other countries have historically relied a lot on nuclear energy. And I think we saw only 2 days ago at COP26 President Macron say that clearly that France will continue in the future to build nuclear reactors, also out of the consideration of more kind of strategic autonomy and less reliance on fossil fuel imports. At the same time, you see that the German government seems to have made a very strong strategic choice that to decommission coal in their energy mix, they will rely on gas-fired power plants, at least for the transition phase. And similarly, that's the argument you often hear from for example, Central and Eastern European countries, is that their starting point is a different one, and also in terms of land availability and seas, they don't have the same space as some coastal countries to deploy windmills, at a large scale in the middle of the sea. For them, it's simply not an option. So I think you see all those different starting points, and I think the taxonomy is trying to put that in a list, but I think we have to recognize that the countries will still have to make their own choices on where they are in terms of their future energy mix. Obviously, we hope the right choices, and that's where the taxonomy can give a real indication to private capital where it needs to go. But I think we have to be careful to realize that probably having one taxonomy doesn't mean that those conversations are suddenly going to go away.
Thank you very much, Victor. It's really interesting, your words. And I would come back to the first speaker, to Luca Atardi, but I want to also remember to the public that it's possible to write down some question to our speakers on using the tools on the right of your screen, and we will have the possibility to have their opinion briefly. Luca, I would ask you some more about your role. And in your view, what are the opportunities related, of course, to the use of taxonomy that can mark a trend towards which companies can reorient or orient their efforts?
I think.
Thank you.
Do you hear me? Yes.
Yes. Okay. We can hear you.
Okay. So for sure, I think one of the first benefit immediate is an open dialogue with the investor. This great momentum of sustainable finance created for the first time sharing period between sustainability and finance. And since 2019, we have been facing some obstacle in defining the KPIs for sustainable financing instruments. Some obstacles like criteria, metrics, the standardization of how is it challenging these KPIs, for example, in the issuance of a sustainability-linked bond. And for sure, taxonomy helps to identify definitely all these points. Taxonomy is useful in order to compare different companies in terms of plans and current performances. Before this, only for example, the Science-Based Target Initiative certification was nearly comparable to this, but because how to say, it certifies the contribution of a company to achieve the 2 degree or 1.5 scenario, but we know that taxonomy, the weight is completely different. And as I said before, in the last green bond issuance, this approach with taxonomy was well perceived by the market for its clear contribution to the objective to climate change mitigation. And the result was also immediate in terms of greenium spread, so in terms of interest rate. At the same time, I think taxonomy allows company to set their strategy. So, for example, in our previous plan, our CEO wanted to show the share of taxonomy capex of the plan in the accumulated view. And some investment decisions were taken to change the percentage of eligible capex. So I think that taxonomy could steer the company in the right direction and be ready, and a company can be aligned with the international and national strategy. For example, for us was useful to know that we can contribute also to the Italian recovery and resilience plan. Finally, we know that taxonomy is a tool to avoid greenwashing if used correctly. So I think that it's a sort of threshold to overcome in order to reach the integration between sustainability and the ordinary business administration. In fact, we have three main KPIs: the capex, opex, and revenues that are economic as much as sustainable. So I think a company, as I said before, must invest more in awareness and capacity building internally. Just to give also some practical example, just to give effectiveness of this path toward strategic sustainability, I think you could include taxonomy in the evaluation process of all projects in a business plan. You can also work on implementing a formal internal control process on non-financial KPIs, like over the financial KPIs. And also you can start thinking about the CSR directive that will require disclosure on this topic in the financial statement.
Thank you, Luca. It seems that it's really important to establish an internal mode, a new approach for have an holistic also commitment of all different professionalities inside your company, and this could be really important to take in mind, to bear in mind for the future, because it's really important to develop an internal model that is fit for your business and fit for your activities. And I would ask to Sara, thanks Luca, something about a new alliance that was founded just a couple of months ago. ES Generation is a new initiative promoted by Eurosif, the Italian Federation of Banking and Insurers and Investors, and Borsa Italiana. Could you tell us something more about this initiative, and what could become the role of this alliance in raising awareness about the EU taxonomy all over the world, maybe facilitating its dissemination in this new network? Thanks.
Thanks, Pietro. Yes, Generation Italy is the Italian Financial Center for Sustainability. Italy, when chairing the G7 in 2016, hosted as part of the environmental meeting, the initiative of creating a network of financial center for sustainability. So the network that is now supported by the UN Development Program was an idea of under the Italian presidency of the G7. The network was funded by the Italian Ministry of the Environment, and we are proud to be now representing Italy on the network to help us understand where Italy stands in terms of promoting sustainable finance compared to other financial centers. And we believe that the taxonomy can be a tool we can use to track progress on a set of criteria that, at least for the European financial centers, will be shared and will create a common language. The exposure of the Italian financial ecosystem to the green economy as measured by the taxonomy will be an important indicator. We are not there yet, so we are working within the network FC4S on this. Beyond Europe, on looking at other jurisdictions, we agree with the findings of the Sustainable Finance Working Group that was re-established by the Italian presidency of the G20, and we support the view also shared by Mrs. Siracusa earlier that interoperability of taxonomies across the various jurisdictions is very important. Investors don't just invest in companies that are based in Europe. It's very important that we don't risk a fragmentation of capital markets because there are different frameworks in different jurisdictions. So this is also something that we will support as a position around the taxonomy within the network of FC4S. FC4S means Financial Centers for Sustainability, supported by the UNDP and funded by the Italian Ministry of Environment and an idea under the presidency of the G7 a few years ago. So I think there's a role for the Italian financial ecosystem to shape the conversation around taxonomies, but also to demonstrate progress. So we look forward to having some data once the disclosure obligations come into force.
Thank you, Sara. Just yesterday, Russia and China in Glasgow announced that they will adopt a taxonomy, a sustainability taxonomy inspired by EU taxonomy. Maybe this could become another driver to spread our model all over the world. And I would ask, thank you, Sara. I would ask Victor the last question on this roundtable. Then we will open the floor to questions from the public. I would like say I would know something about the role of Eurosif in this debate. How Eurosif, I remember to the public that Eurosif is member of the network built in Brussels under Eurosif that advocate all over Europe the instance on sustainability finance. In your view, it's how is changed in the last 2 years the sensibility, the awareness of public European public institution on these topics?
Thanks, thanks, Pietro. No, and of course, we are very delighted that Eurosif is a very active member in Eurosif. Just for all the audience here, Eurosif is the European Sustainable Investment Forum, bringing together Eurosif and all its peers in different European countries together in one network. And then, me and the team based in Brussels, we really are trying to convey the common views of the SIFs constantly to European policymakers on sustainable finance and more broadly, sustainability issues, be it on the Green Deal or the Fit for 55 package. And I think what's been really interesting to see, at least where I sit, is that there is a demand from policymakers to have these kind of stakeholders like us that are really, I think that are really trying to make sure that the legislation works, that the legislation actually works in a way that it seeks to deliver on the public policy goals that are underpinning it. I think we have to remember taxonomy, the disclosures regulation. They were done both to limit greenwashing as well as over time to reorient capital towards the right type of investments. And I think this will be the test in the next couple of years is what we're doing, delivering on those objectives, and what works in stimulating that transition that we talked about so much today. So I think to say that there's really a demand for it from many policymakers as well, for organizations that have this kind of holistic and sustainability focused lens through which we evaluate the different pieces of regulation.
Thank you, Victor. I remember to the public that some ONGs reveals that there are more than 500 lobbyists in Glasgow supporting fossil industries and for maintaining the so-called status quo. So it's important to highlighting also this point of view. We are collecting some questions from the public, and I see that there is the first question is for Mrs. Siracusa. Thanks to be here, Mrs. Siracusa. And the question is, what do you think of the future of social taxonomy integration in the green taxonomy? I remember to the public that the work of platform, EU platform, is still open. We are waiting the elaboration of the document from the EU platform regarding social taxonomy. And this is a really important pillar because, as already mentioned, Francesco Bicciato, the sustainability is composed by 3 pillars: environmental, social, and governance. What's your opinion on that, Mrs. Siracusa? Thanks.
Thank you very much. And this is a very important question. So the reflection is still ongoing. And you rightly referred to the Platform for Sustainable Finance, which is, of course, a group of experts and stakeholders who advises the Commission. And they are working on a report on social taxonomy. And it's interesting because it's a very, very developed debate in the platform itself, which has itself examined a number of models. So we see, of course, that an important question is what model would preside over a possible potential social taxonomy. Following that report from the platform, the Commission itself will provide a report to the Council and European Parliament of what provisions would be necessary if the taxonomy were to be extended to other objectives. So as you see, we are still in a reflection phase on all of this, and there is absolutely no conclusion or no way forward identified yet. But may I just underline that the ESG part is present in everything that we do as regards sustainable taxonomy, and in particular on disclosures. And of course, I refer also to the CSRD, which was adopted, the proposal was adopted, of course, in April, and the discussion is still ongoing. And that, of course, covers all 3 pillars, ESG as a whole and social as well. So I think that's important to underline, because when people talk about social taxonomy, they may think that that's the only tool to include social consideration. It isn't, and we already include the full spectrum of ESG considerations in our other instruments. But as I said, there is a lot of reflection ongoing, and we look forward to receiving this report. And of course, we look forward to quite an interesting debate, I'm sure, with all stakeholders on these aspects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Siracusa. We are waiting for the next publication of the draft. And we are collecting some more questions. The next question is for Mr. Luca Atardi. And Luca, the people want to know how could energy transition impact your energy management? And big question. Maybe will become a mix of different sources of energy.
Yes.
It could be possible.
For sure, I think energy transition is already impacted our strategies. For sure, all the side regarding the energy production. We are, as I said, the second largest producer of the country. I think we will play a key role in the energy transition of the country. Since 2020, A2A committed to be in line with the Paris Agreement scenario. We committed to reduce our emission factor by 47% by 2030. And that was certified also by the Science Based Target Initiative. So we have a trajectory that is aligned with the 2 degrees scenario. Is not I think I know that is not enough because the best scenario is 1.5, but for a country that is so dependent from gas and fossil fuel, is a good news having the second largest producer be aligned with the second degree scenario for now. But in the in our last plan, we have a strong and huge development of new renewable energy sources. We will contribute with more than 60% of the group energy production from renewable energy sources. So, as you said, our mix will change definitely in the next decade.
Thank you, Luca. It's very important your point of view because you are a practitioner, and so you could give us feedback from the real economy. We are collecting some more questions from the audience. There is a very long question for Sara and also for Victor. I'll try to give a feedback firstly from Sara. The question is, may the extension of the taxonomy to significant harmful and transitional activities be a key driver to climate transition? And the second one is, what about the risk of excluding those detrimental sectors which mostly need sustainable financing for transformation? This is the second question is focused maybe on engagement. That is one of the most important drivers to manage the transitional period. Sara, give us your opinion.
Thanks, Pietro. Introducing a taxonomy for highly harmful activities is very important because it will dispel one of the key misunderstandings about the taxonomy. There is this perception that activities that are not included in the green taxonomy by definition are excluded from something, and by definition are harmful. This clearly is not the case. The green taxonomy was designed with a view to addressing the sectors with the highest mitigation potential. So the idea was to highlight those activities that could help the most to the transition. Then there are a number of activities that are sort of neutral, that are certainly going to be part of a carbon neutral European economy as well. But then there are other sectors that might be instead considered critical, harmfully so, in a carbon neutral economy. Sometimes, we get the question: what about when we develop, financial institutions develop their strategy? What about high carbon activities? It's a very difficult question to answer. Where, for example, would you consider automotive companies that manufacture traditional cars with internal combustion engines as harmful? People always have in mind just oil exploration, but it's very important to clarify where significant harm begins and where it ends. Otherwise, also from an engagement perspective, as Pietro was mentioning, or from an exclusion perspective, when it comes to exclusion strategies from funds, we will be just operating in a fog, because we really don't know where the negative impacts are. So I stop here. Perhaps Victor wants to add something.
The imagine of fog, it's very real. Victor, the floor is yours. What's your vision on that?
I'm gonna. I promise you, Pietro. I'll bring a bit of controversy to the panel now. I think I follow the reasoning for having a significant harmful in transitional activities taxonomy. Where I have to confess, in all honesty, I am concerned is that when we see the debate that we had and the quality of the debate, and I think, like Sara just mentioned some of the fake facts or misconceptions that exist about the taxonomy, and there's plenty of those. We have to recall, we're only talking about defining what's green. I am not entirely certain that our European political process is quite ready to go down the discussion of what is defining significantly harmful. I wish it was, but I think we have to be careful that we're not going to end up in a place where all the countries and all the different political groups are shouting at each other and unable to reach an agreement. And we also have to ask ourselves, I think, is defining that list really going to be the decisive factor that triggers the transition? And I think here, and that's my personal view, but I think there's far more powerful policy tools out there that could achieve that much faster. We are discussing, the EU Green Deal, the revision of the emissions trading system, and carbon pricing more generally. That may be something much more powerful to trigger the transition. And I think the second sub question is the recurring question always. Do you invest and engage, or do you divest and let others do the work in terms of those difficult, those very high emitting sectors? And I think we've seen, the last couple of weeks, some major asset owners across Europe actually announcing that they're fully divesting of fossil fuels, and you see again the intensity of that debate being triggered again. About whether you divest or whether you engage, and if so, when you engage, at what point enough is enough. But I think it's also, I think the last point I'll make there is we're starting very much from the debate that necessarily everyone or every company that is highly present in the fossil fuels industry now are going to be tomorrow's green champions. And I think we don't know that. Maybe they are, maybe they are not. And maybe some companies will do that transition fast enough, and maybe some will not and will disappear. And it won't be the first time in history that some companies disappear.
Thank you very much. We are perfectly on time, and I want to thank you. I want to thank my guests in this roundtable for their suggestion and their different point of view that enrich our reflection on this important evolution of European rules. And this is your time, Francesco Bicciato. I'll give you the floor for wrap up and for closing remark of this, I hope, interesting roundtable. Thanks.
Thank you, Pietro. Thank you, Pietro. Thank you, Pietro. I don't know if we can show all the speakers on the screen. I ask. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we can see everybody, and I really thank you to everybody for the contents and for the interesting debate. We have a lot of inputs, even to plan our future activities as ITASIF. We will continue with our activities in policy monitoring, and also in order to understand which could be the impact on our members and in general SRI market, because it's quite important to have an idea which will be the real impact that this regulation will have. We will do this, consolidating our relationship with the European Commission, and again, thanks a lot, Ms. Siracusa, directly, and Victor, we can say through Eurosif, because I remember that Eurosif is a part of Eurosif, so I think that this kind of collaboration can, we can say, give more impact in order to arrive to a positive dialogue. Again, with Sara, we will do the same at international level with this new alliance of Yes Generation. So I think that we are preparing a real pacifist combative ground, we can say, in order to get positive results. So thanks a lot also to Luca and Pietro. I just remind you that the SRI week, we can say weeks, because there are 2 weeks that we are in front of us, continue. So if you are interested, you can register through the website of Forum per la Finanza Sostenibile. I remind you particularly the closure and the final meeting, the closure of the week, where we try to draw a sort of scenario for the future of sustainable finance in Italy and Europe. So thanks again, and see you next time. Bye bye. Okay.